clearly the royal family or the institution of the monarchy has serious issues of racism.
Let's not forget that this is a public relations stunt that was created by Harry and Meghan to introduce themselves to their new country.
We're living in a pandemic, and this soap opera is playing out. There are way more important things.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Libby Znaimer.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Libby Znaimer. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Harry and Meghan to most of the world, dropped a royal bomb with their explosive TV interview about the struggles and pain they have faced as part of the royal family. It took the world and apparently the Queen by surprise. Today we'll discuss the serious allegations of racism and indifference to mental health, the palace response, and what this means to Canadians. But first, let's tee up the topic.
The interview that shook the royal brand.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
Harry and Meghan laid bare the royal rift in a 2-hour sit-down with Oprah.
Trapped within the system, like the rest of my family are. My father and my brother, they are trapped.
From Meghan's struggles with mental health.
But I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would do it. And I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
To accusations of racism.
So we have in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title. And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
And revelations about Prince Harry's relationship with his father.
I feel really let down because he's been through something similar. He knows what pain feels like. And Archie's his grandson.
The primetime special pulled a whopping 61 million viewers around the planet. Meanwhile, the fallout over the broadcast continues, with predictions its impact could be felt for generations.
Let's start by getting a quick response from everyone on their reactions to the interview. Let's start with David Onley, the former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario.
Thanks very much, Libby. You know, if you went back and looked at the point of time from the wedding of Harry and Meghan and then rolled it forward to the interview with Oprah and positioned it as an extended episode of The Crown, or broke down the life events over the last few years into an episode of The Crown, it would fit perfectly because it would be portraying the difficulties within a family. And we all have family difficulties, but we're not being chased and hounded by the media and not having accusations leveled at us that's brought out in such a fashion that people around the world see it. So remains to be seen where we're going from here.
Jessica.
Well, I think the interview itself really drives home the fact that racism is a institutional construct versus people being individual racists, and how racism has been a reoccurring theme over the last, or it's been a reoccurring theme over the last 6 months, or since June at least, and how it's reappearing, whether it's the Meghan Markle, Regis Kaczynski-Pasquet, or George Floyd. So where do we go from here?
John Manley.
You know, I think that these two media-savvy celebrities chose a very peculiar path in order to seek greater privacy. And I think for Canadians, it ought to matter not at all, except to the extent that it raises the broader question of whether we really need to have the firstborn child of the House of Windsor as our head of state here in Canada.
Peter Donolo.
To me, it just shows, underlines just how out of touch the institution of the monarchy is, how dated it is, how from another era it is, and how we should get rid of it as fast as we can. Let's follow the lead of other Commonwealth countries, most of whom have abolished the monarchy, and do the same in Canada.
Amber.
There were absolutely no surprises in this interview. In fact, the script for this interview could have been written in any household across North America. We knew what was going to come out of this. We knew how Meghan would have felt, how she would have been treated by this family whose whole institution relies on the purity of blood and holding themselves up to a standard that excludes people who look like myself. So the respect is not there in that sense of the word, and we knew what was going to come out of this interview. There were no surprises at all.
Andrea.
Let's not forget that this is a public relations stunt that was created by Harry and Meghan to introduce themselves to their new country, to the United States, for the purposes of building awareness ahead of their business relationships and business endeavors that they're going to do next. And so in that effort to raise awareness and likability, did they do that? Absolutely. Their support increased 22% in the United States. So everything else was collateral damage. It was a success for them.
The Queen released a statement saying the family was, quote, saddened to learn the full extent of their challenges, but she pushed back by saying that some recollections may vary, promising to address the matter privately as a family matter. So is that enough? Amber?
You know, I think that the Queen's statement was as succinct and proper as it should have been, because you can't even begin to imagine what Meghan would have felt like being dropped into this atmosphere. And so to acknowledge how they felt, to say that they're going to look into it themselves, I felt was a huge step. But the reality is this was a Black woman dropped into a household filled with white people and a white hierarchy that did not include her, or did not embrace her. And the reality is they didn't even embrace the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Princess Diana. So to understand it from her perspective, it would have been even tenfold upon her, that feeling of not belonging.
David, why was the statement so curt? I'm assuming that there was a long line of courtiers who worked on it and parsed every word.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, the best way to make sure you don't get misquoted is to keep your statement as short as you possibly can. And the Queen is not renowned for, the palace is not renowned for giving lengthy, wordy assessments on a whole range of things. So they keep it short and to the point. And so I agree with Amber. That's why they kept it to that length.
John Manley, should they have said more? Does it matter?
You know, really, I couldn't care less what they said. It's just to me so unimportant and so irrelevant in a world that's, you know, we're living in a pandemic. And this soap opera is playing out, there are way more important things.
But it's so entertaining.
Oh, it's entertaining, but you know, all celebrities, you know, fiascos are entertaining. We could watch the Kardashians. It would make no difference.
Peter, I'm assuming you agree.
I am. And, you know, listen, I actually think everybody so far that I've heard in this panel is right. I mean, clearly the royal family or the institution of the monarchy has serious issues of racism, has a history of racism that goes as deep as the British Empire. There's no question. But also those who say this is a PR play are also right. That to me, it underlines just a total irrelevance and how out of step this institution is with the 21st century. Queen Elizabeth basically on her own personal kind of force of nature has kept this going much longer than it should. I've always said, let's take a leaf from the major league sports teams. And when she goes, let's retire her jersey.
Jessica, is it fair to call it a PR stunt on Meghan's part?
I would definitely say she's leveraging the opportunity. I think in both sides, it's also fair for the Queen to address it as a family matter and to try and resolve it within their family.
We'll be digging into the allegations of racism when we come back. But first, Prince William broke his silence and our viewers shared their thoughts. Stay with us.
Sir, have you spoken to your brother since the interview?
No, I haven't spoken to him yet, but I will do.
And can you just let me know, is the royal family a racist family, sir?
No, we're very much not a racist family.
If this racism stuff really happened, it's disgusting, and I don't blame Harry and Meghan for leaving.
I feel for Harry and Meghan, and I feel really terrible what happened to them. And I think that the monarchy is going to have a very difficult time proving that they're not racist because of the history of the British monarchy.
When someone tells you their feelings about that, believe them, right? Especially when they're part of a minority. It's like not part, like white people's place to say that she's lying. Like, for what?
Meghan was an opportunity for the royals and for the palace to sort of come into the 21st century.
Welcome back. The most concerning of the allegations made by Meghan and Harry related to racism and how their son Archie would be accepted into the royal family. Here's another excerpt from that interview.
In those months when I was pregnant, all around this same time, so we have in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title, and also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What?
And
who is having that conversation? There is a conversation. Hold up.
There's
Stop
several
right now.
There's several conversations.
There's a
about
conversation with you,
with Harry,
about how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
Ooh.
Well, that was by far the most damaging bomb in an interview full of bombshells. It's been described as the trigger for the most serious crisis the monarchy has faced in half a century. So, is it that serious, David?
It really remains to be seen, although the fact of the matter is we here in Toronto are talking about it with a panel of people from various backgrounds. I saw an interview a short time ago. I stumbled across it 2 days ago on YouTube with Dick Cavett and James Earl Jones, and he said, whichever group of people, James Earl Jones in his great voice, whichever group of people are in the most pain, they get to protest. And so Meghan gets to protest until it's proven otherwise, and so does Harry. So I think that's where our start point is.
Okay, Amber, I want to bring back a conversation we had a long time ago. You were producing my radio show around the time of the wedding. We were doing a show on this. I was probably rolling my eyes saying, I guess we got to do a show on this. And what you told me was that I didn't realize how big a deal it was for women of color that a woman of color, a biracial woman, could be accepted into the royal family. And my reaction was, really? This is what you aspire to marry into the most archaic, arcane, hereditary, hidebound institution on the planet?
And it's not about what we aspire to. It's more about the accomplishment of being allowed into that platform or allowed onto that stage and watching a woman of mixed race being paraded in front of all of this pageantry that we, up until then, had only attributed to be for white people and beautiful white women that we have seen watch marry prince after prince after prince on TV. For young Black girls and for young Black women, and I have to admit for myself, thinking back to when I was a child, this was a dream come true for me as a young Black woman, watching someone who I never thought would be able to walk down that aisle, to have that level of pageantry, to show the respect paid to our culture as Black people, and to see that laid on an international stage for all to see. That was empowering. It was emotional. It brought feelings up in me that I didn't think would be there because, frankly, I couldn't care less about the royals on any other given day. And so it did mean a lot.
Jessica, is it that emotional for you? Am I just being kind of an old line second wave feminist?
I would differ a little bit, just in the sense that I don't think it's about Meghan or any woman for that matter being allowed to do anything. It more comes down to it just shows the need for innovation and changing the way things are done. How Harry broke from protocol, how there's a lack of consistency when Charles married Camilla, who was a divorcee. As much as they didn't give her the title or whatnot, if Charles becomes king, she'll become queen. So seeing the consistency, but for me, it's more so not placing the value of Black people in relation to or adjacent to dominant culture. The other key thing being that I agree. I think every girl at some point through Disney and all of the other great tools out there, great products and promotions, wants to be a princess. And
Never.
I think, well, no, not at all, ever. But just seeing someone other than dominant culture as a princess and being recognized as such was definitely, I mean, it was, we all watched. That's all I can say. So it was definitely something to see. And I can agree with Amber on that part there.
Andrea, so is it the power of image that trumped basically common sense to think this is not a match with such an old line institution?
So if you listened to Harry as part of the interview, he mentioned that Meghan was an opportunity for the royals and for the palace to sort of come into the 21st century and sort of show this was an opportunity, and it could have been a public relations win for them. We've accepted people of different races and cultures, and an American and a divorcee, and look at us, aren't we so progressive compared to where we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago? So yes, optically, this is what it was. It was a charade, a facade for everyone to sort of say hooray for the royal family.
So given that this opportunity for modernizing the institution didn't fly, does it just prove your point, John and Peter?
This is an institution, and I would stress this, it did serve a purpose at a period of time. And Queen Elizabeth herself has served with great distinction and dignity. But I don't know why everyone's surprised. This is an aristocratic family at the top of the British Empire. What would have been breaking news was to find there was no racism in that group.
That's a very good point, Peter. Can you add to that?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's a bit of an oxymoron to talk about modernizing the monarchy. It's like saying, having a jet-propelled horse and buggy. I mean, it is from another world, another era. And it is the monarchy is fundamentally in opposition to a democracy and to a diverse society like our own, for the reasons that we've talked about, that it's an inherited title, that there's a bloodline, quote unquote, purity. I'd also add there's a third insult along with these injuries, and that is that it's foreign. They're not Canadian. We've been in a different era. It's been running on fumes, thanks to Queen Elizabeth, but now it's time really to turn the page. And this is an institution that can't be modernized. I'm sorry, because it is inherently from another era. It's inherently medieval.
Okay, more to come. Stay tuned.
The reality of it was that sounded completely believable because Harry's mother went through the same thing.
Welcome back. Meghan made another serious allegation in that interview when she spoke of being suicidal and being denied the help she wanted. Here's another clip from the Oprah interview.
Look, I was really ashamed to say it at the time, and ashamed to have to admit it to Harry especially, because I know how much loss he's suffered.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would do it. And I just didn't want to be alive anymore. And that was a very clear and real and frightening, constant thought. I went to the institution and I said that I needed to go somewhere to get help. I said that I've never felt this way before and I need to go somewhere. And I was told that I couldn't, that it wouldn't be good for the institution.
Shades of Harry's mother, Princess Diana. Andrea?
Absolutely, and it rings a parallel to the interview that Diana did with the BBC. That was the last crisis that we saw with the monarchy. If you want people to really connect with you, that is a really hot topic right now. We're all very anxious. We all have a lot of mental health issues stemming from society in general, but also with the pandemic and being locked up for a year. So we can all relate to those feelings. And so she came across very relatable, and that to say that no one was there for her, that is quite damaging.
David, from what you know of the institution, does that sound like something possible?
Well, to me, that was one of the more believable parts of what she said. The reality of it was that sounded completely believable because Harry's mother went through the same thing. We know that to be fact. So it appears in this instance that they really did not learn that lesson. And why wouldn't a young woman, especially an American, with all due respect to my American friends, who has been dropped into this world, why wouldn't they feel unusual pressures? Any one of us who has been dropped into that world would have, but especially in her circumstances, and especially as a woman of color.
Jessica?
I was just going to echo in terms of the intersections all coming together in that space. There's a push that started around June for racism to be declared a mental health crisis. So combine that with the fact that she's pregnant and in this space like Princess Diana, and it's just it's a one-way trip to a disaster.
I guess one question I would have is that, Harry had his own struggles. I'm sort of not clear on how she would have needed the palace to agree. Amber, do you have any insight on that?
I don't think that at that point there was much she could do on her own. I mean, I feel like she would have had to go through the palace people, through the institution, the firm, as they want to call it. She would have had to go through someone for help. And maybe her husband wasn't always there. As she said, he'd often be off working, fulfilling his princely duties. And so she was there surrounded by people she didn't trust, didn't know who was leaking information to the press about her, didn't know where she would turn. Obviously, she turned to someone, and they refused her any sort of help. And once again, this is showing the palace just refuses to evolve.
This is for both John and Peter, because you've both been involved at the highest levels of politics. So I'm curious if there is a parallel there, if you'd be talking about a prime minister's family, or if there is something fundamentally different here about the control and the reaction to something like mental health.
I think in the public domain, at least in the political realm, we've come a long way in opening up about some of these issues. And I think the veil of secrecy and privacy around the royal family is a little different from what we see today. In my brief observation of the palace, which isn't much, what I would say is that a Canadian minister probably has more people around to be supportive and helpful and give advice and intervene than it would appear that a young person marrying into the royal family would have.
Peter, you've worked for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, listen, clearly, first of all, it's apples and oranges, because in Canada, we have a political culture, thank God, where people's private lives are respected. We don't really care about who does what in the family of a minister or prime minister, as long as it's legal. Whereas, listen, let's not kid ourselves. The British situation, a whole industry is built around promoting, parsing, examining the lives of the royals. We've talked a lot, for example, we haven't even talked about the other crisis that they had to live through, and they haven't handled very well in the past year. And that's a crisis of Prince Andrew and his, relationship with Epstein and the Epstein scandal. Again, some people would see a double standard there, and the treatment of him versus the treatment of Meghan Markle. But to me, it points to the same kind of overall just dysfunction, cesspool of kind of relations, and an institution that really should be tossed in the trash bin.
Harry gave us some insight into his mental state, too. In his own words, he and his family are trapped into their lives as royals. Here's another excerpt from the Oprah interview.
I was trapped, but I didn't know I was trapped. But the moment that I met Meg, and then our worlds sort of collided in the most amazing of ways, and then to see how
Please explain how you, Prince Harry, raised in a palace, in a life of privilege, literally a prince, how you were trapped.
Trapped within the system, like the rest of my family are. My father and my brother, they are trapped.
Trapped in a life of luxury and privilege. And I have to say, this is where I draw the line at the prince's, what's a nice word for whining?
Belly aching? Well, it's true. I mean, there's only so much you can take. I have empathy for both Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, but even for Meghan Markle, you knew what you were getting into. And if you didn't, come on, Google it. I mean, we all have seen...
She said she didn't Google him, and she knew
said
nothing.
she didn't Google him, but come on, give me a break.
Yeah.
As soon as anybody meets anybody nowadays, they're Googling right away. And they have all of their information. They know their address, where they lived, where they worked, who their friends are. So it's really, really easy. And so I find that hard to believe. Like, boo-hoo. I understand the circumstances you were thrown into, but let's not act like, it's not a life of privilege.
So, is the monarchy going to survive this internecine feuding, especially when the heir to the throne, Prince Charles, is much less popular than the Queen? We'll get into that after the break. Stay tuned.
When it comes to the monarchy, I feel like Canada, I feel we're like millennials who won't move out of our parents' basement, okay?
Welcome back. The royal rift seems to already have had an impact on the support for the Queen here in Canada. 53% of Canadians want to cut ties with the monarchy. And if Barbados can sever the strings to the crown, as it will in November, why not Canada? Well, to start with, our constitutional system doesn't make that an easy task. Every province needs to be on board for an amendment. And Alberta and BC require referendums. So do the practicalities rule out any change? Let's throw that to our constitutional experts. David.
You just hit the nail on the head, the difficulty of pulling this off, if that is the desire. And if the popularity for the Queen has dropped, and if it's even lower for Prince Charles is getting on in years, and the decision is then made, well, maybe we should do away with our relationship as it exists now with the Queen. Does that mean as well, it does mean as well, if we do, that William and Kate would not be involved in a future Canadian picture? So is that what we want? So the real question at this point is, let's have the discussion about the future of the monarchy, but then let's also figure out how that mechanism is going to take place. What are we going to do to make that happen?
John Manley, the way I've had it explained to me, or every time this kind of comes up, is that it's going to be impossible to get all the provinces to agree. And, also from my point of view, this is well down the list of anything important that you need to get a national agreement on. So why even expend all the capital that would be needed to try to get this done?
That's about right. And it's the fear I have is that the Brits will do away with the monarchy before Canada does. And they'll all move here. We'll be looking after all of them. No, but it is complicated, and it's a difficult political calculation to make, to expend the effort and time that would be required to amend the Constitution to do this. And that's why most political leaders would say there's really much more important fish to fry than this.
Do you agree with that, Peter?
Nothing like good old-fashioned inertia, right? The Canadians ought to patent it. Listen, when it comes to the monarchy, I feel like Canada, I feel we're like millennials who won't move out of our parents' basement, okay? And the thing is, and the excuse we use is because it's not important to anyone or too much trouble. I mean, what a bunch of slackers. Listen, if Lester Pearson had had that view 50 years ago, more than 55 years ago, we wouldn't have a Canadian flag. He had a minority government. There wasn't a burning issue. It wasn't the top 10 of everyone's issue to get rid of the red ensign with a Union Jack in it and create a Canadian flag. But he said, no, I'm going to put some political grease into this, make this an issue. And he did. And aren't we all grateful that we have our own flag, although it took us almost 100 years as a country to get it? We're not the country we were 20 years ago or 50 years ago. We're one of the most diverse countries in the world, and people love the new, they love energy. And we should be embracing the future, not tying ourselves to the past. So I actually think that we underestimate the extent of excitement, the amount of excitement that a project like Replacing the Monarchy could create.
Interesting, just to bring a personal note into it, my husband is of British descent, and every Christmas Day, like, we've got to listen to the Queen's message. I remember finding all of this very amusing. And he said, you would be shocked, but I would not be against getting rid of the monarchy either. So I don't know, there you go. Amber, as a Black woman, how do you feel about that?
Well, just as a Canadian woman, personally, I feel like we've got this Canada thing down pretty well. By now, I think we know what we're doing, and I think that there's no reason to have the monarchy still play such a vital role in our lives. So I'm on board with Peter 100%. It's no need. We've got our big boy pants on. We're good to go.
Andrea, what about the image of Canada? And again, you know, the British heritage is part of our history and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and that's going to play right into the political hands of whoever opposes this, right? So while we've changed in the last 20 years, we've also changed drastically in the last 4 years, right? In the Trump era. If anyone were to bring this up, this will just be blown into a political issue, and we are so polarized as a society that regardless of what we feel, unfortunately, we'll split along party lines. And so this is I have no faith that anything can get done.
Jessica, do you agree?
I'm more interested in understanding what the benefit is or what the role is in this current time and how they affect Canada. And based on that, then I'd make a decision. I'm all about culture and I'm about tradition, but if it's not functional, then what's the point?
Okay. Before we go to break, more from our viewers.
Unfortunately, I think it's the reality of today's media, making a spectacle on TV to get a point across.
Certain things need to be brought to light about how the British monarchy actually is and what they do to their own family.
You know, they want to control their image. They are going to be doing a lot of media stuff in the States, so I guess that was their way of protecting their image.
They were given a voice by like a Black female celebrity, Oprah, and I love that. Like, she had something that was important to say and she said it.
You're going to be part-time royals and still live your glamorous lifestyle, rubbing elbows with Beyonce and Jay-Z on the weekend. That's not going to happen. That's not the role.
Welcome back. Meghan and Harry talked extensively in the Oprah interview about the lack of security for them and their son Archie, and the fact that Archie won't have a title, at least not unless Charles ascends the throne. So is it reasonable for them to expect a security detail if they're no longer working royals? David, do you want to explain the line of succession and the special letters in, I think, 2012 and all of that?
Well, I can simplify it that it is a generational thing. So indeed, when Charles ascends to the throne, then Archie would be entitled to that title of prince. But that was a law that was passed back before World War I. I don't know whether it's a matter of the two of them not being properly briefed to state it in the way they did in an interview. The way it came out, it sounded mean and spiteful, as opposed to being, well, that's what other royals of the equivalent level experience. And by the way, that prince title would revert to Archie when Charles comes to the throne.
Yeah, she did clarify that. Jessica, I mean, you know, I think Harry in the interview said it's British protection. I mean, I was wondering, do they even realize if they're in another country, it's the other country that pays for their security? And as a Canadian taxpayer, do you want to foot the bill for these multimillionaires?
Well, as a Canadian taxpayer, no desire to pay to fit the bill unless they'll pay for mine when I go to the UK. But it's definitely something that there needs to be some consistency. And if it's not being given to Beatrice and Eugenie, then by all means, it would make sense. But again, just understanding when it comes to Prince Andrew and some of the other people who have had other challenges or public matters that have kind of forced them out of the limelight or out of their royal duties. is there consistency in the way that everyone's being treated and dealt with?
Yeah, I mean, part of, I guess, what got me, because they were talking about, they didn't seem to get why they couldn't be somewhat working royals on the one hand and on the other cutting multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix based on the fact that they're royals. They seem to think that they were being unfairly treated when, I don't know, that seems sort of basic conflict of interest, Amber.
Well, that's when the tiny, expensive violins started playing, because we all know, I mean, it's ridiculous to think that, you know, A, that other countries are going to be responsible for your security, B, that you're going to be part-time royals and still live your glamorous lifestyle, rubbing elbows with Beyonce and Jay-Z on the weekend. That's not going to happen. That's not the role. And the fact is that Harry knows what the role is. He saw the responsibilities. He saw the toll it's taken on his father, on his mother, on his older brother, as he prepares to move further up into the family and take on more and more responsibilities. And so it's for him to try to pretend that he didn't realize that, you know, Archie wouldn't have a title, that they wouldn't be protected wherever they went, is complete ridiculousness. I mean, they knew what they were going to be getting into. They knew the situation. He should have educated Meghan, because he's the one who was in this position and who's seen what it's done to his other family members. So he knew better.
And what about, you know, it wasn't even just the interview. So before the interview, suddenly there were leaks about investigations of Meghan. And after the interview, there were updates, like they dropped the racism allegation bomb, and the next day, you know, through Oprah, it came that it wasn't the Queen or Prince Philip. And Harry also said his father hasn't taken his calls, but he talked to his brother and his father, and the talks weren't productive, and all of this through leaks. Andrea, I mean, what is this?
The interview itself was a success, except for that security issue. I think they lost so many points, and it could have just been avoided if they just kept their mouths shut. Like, if they had everyone going and sympathizing, and then they sat in this beautiful backyard with this orchard grove in the back and whined about how they needed other people's money. What we're seeing is Charles has not said a thing. I think the person who's lost the most in this is Charles, because Kate and William will be fine, and William's already walking around and making comments, right or wrong. But Charles hasn't said a thing, and he's been quiet, he's been hidden. And so maybe we'll see an ascend to the throne of, we'll skip Charles altogether, and maybe this was the end result of this interview.
Okay, here's another Oprah excerpt about the tabloid headlines about a rivalry with Meghan's soon-to-be sister-in-law, Kate.
What was hard to get over was being blamed for something that not only I didn't do, but that happened to me, and the people who were part of our wedding going to our comms team and saying, I know this didn't happen. I don't have to tell them what actually happened, but I can at least go on the record and say, she didn't make her cry, and they were all told to say.
So all the time the story's out there, you had made Kate cry. You knew all along, and people around you knew that that wasn't true.
Everyone in the institution knew it wasn't true.
So why didn't somebody just say that?
It's a good question. It was only once we were married and everything started to really worsen that I came to understand that not only was I not being protected, but that they were willing to lie to protect other members of the family, but they weren't willing to tell the truth to protect me and my husband.
So Meghan was very hurt by a story that she said was completely untrue. So what is the role of the tabloids in all of this, Andrea?
To sell newspapers. I think the tabloids fed off of what they wanted, what they thought their audiences wanted to see. And clearly, you know, they were right. They thought that Meghan was going to be the villain. She was the outsider. They painted her as such. And here we are.
When we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. But first, a few more comments from our viewers.
I don't want to be continuous in the monarchy. I don't like it.
I think it's like purely an image thing. Like, there's not very much power that's left in that anymore.
So I'm all for defunding the monarchy. I'm sick and tired of their family drama and beef affecting civilians that don't deserve it. I'm all for like a holocratic republic and, you know, just as much love, peace, and harmony and tolerance and teamwork of people of the light as possible.
Welcome back to the Zoomer. It's time for final thoughts. We'll start with Jessica.
Well, just to pick up on what Amber said around media, I think it's interesting how the UK has leveraged their media assets, whereas Meghan and Harry, now that they're residents of the US, leverage the US, one of the most powerful media people in media, to get their story out. So all that to say, in terms of this whole situation, I think it's all about institutions and how people uphold institutions. So when we change how we are as people, institutions will change.
John Manley.
Well, I understand why people are fascinated by celebrity and why they like to talk to one another about the latest celebrity comings and goings, and all of that is fine. I just don't think they should be part of our structure of government.
David.
I think John's right. I think it's two separate issues, and this is a family crisis. It is to a degree a racial crisis, and to a certain extent, in small letters, it's a constitutional crisis. Something, though, that can be resolved, and it's something that we need to address.
Peter.
I think this whole sorry soap opera shows what an anachronism the monarchy and the British royal family are, and hopefully it's a last nail in the coffin for an institution that ought to get going.
Andrea.
Wish you were right, but I see this as a blip that will be forgotten in a few months. I think this is the introduction of Meghan and Harry to U.S. celebrity Hollywood. We'll see what happens with them next.
Amber.
The Canada I love and the Canada that I want to be in and continue to grow in is a Canada of inclusion, of equality, and of acceptance of other people's cultures and races. And frankly, this British monarchy has shown that they are none of those things. So frankly, let's cut the purse strings and move on.
Well, whether you love them or think it's high time to let them go, the royals continue to be a source of endless fascination. The one outcome that seems unlikely is that Harry and Meghan will retreat from the spotlight and live quiet, private lives. For now, it's time to zoom out.